It's good to have with you Katya Salazar. Katya is a good friend of mine. I respect her work. She's an attorney. She graduated in Peru en la Pontificia Católica Universidad, la Universidad Católica Pontificia del Perú. A master in Heidelberg University in Germany. She worked with the True, what I explained to you, she worked with the True Reconciliation Commission of Peru, investigating all the gross human rights violations from the Fujimori regime between 1980 and the 2000. And she also worked with the Peruvian Ombudsman Office, and she worked with an organization that is really special for me, that is IDL, the Instituto for Legal Defense, Instituto de Defensa Legal. It's a non-profit, non-governmental organization in Peru that has been working, expanding the rights of the Peruvian and helping movement and coordinating radio programs in the countryside. Very effective in terms of the fight against Fujimori and the resistance against authoritarians in Peru. She also part of the coalition against impunity. She has been working since 2009 with an organization called Due Process of Law Foundation. And to be honest, for me, it has been an honor to see the changes that she has been bringing to that organization. From very small organization that was making some reports about some legal process and some human rights process, but very small project, to an organization that works right now in Mexico, in different countries. They have been active, bringing cases at the Interamerican Commission of Human Rights, that has been actively advocating for human rights. And she has been doing that without losing her soul of what she is or what the organization is, without being an organization that exploit people by doing the work supposedly supporting people. And the organization, she has been bringing also these elements of social movements in the organization, supporting this vulnerable population and helping them in their struggles against power in those countries. So it is for me an honor to present to you Katya Salazar. Katya, all yours.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, everyone. And it's an honor for me being here. It's been a privilege that you invited me, Carlos, to be in your class, to meeting your students after 2 years, working from home and not having many contacts, especially with students. So thank you very much for your invitation. And while I was listening to your presentation, I found out why you invited me to your class, because you were talking about all these theories about social movements and the human rights movement and NGOs. And yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I've been working in the nonprofit sector since I graduated from the university in Peru. I can say that this is my field, the nonprofit sector, the use of public law in order to promote social change, not just in my country, but in other countries. So yeah, I think I will try to share with you some thoughts, some reflections, some ideas. I know I don't have much time, so I have to reduce what I was thinking to say tonight.
You have 40 minutes.
Okay, yeah, but I would like to hear your students too. So I would like to hear some questions, and I would like to respond to them. So yeah, okay. So I think I can talk like maybe 20 minutes or something like that, and then we can have more like a discussion, like a dialogue, because this is what I would like to do, to promote some curiosity about some of the topics I will mention tonight. to start, as Carlos said, I work as as executive director of the Due Process of Law Foundation, a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. So let me say something. You have to forget the name, because we do much more of due process. This is the name that the founders of the organization decided 25 years ago. And at the beginning, the organization worked on due process, which is a legal concept, very, very limited. But I have to say that along the years, along the 25 years working in Latin America, we do much more than due process. We work to promote the rule of law and human rights in Latin America in general. Of course, we don't work on all topics. We have to decide, we have to pick which topics we want to work for, every 2 or 3 years. We change topics, we change initiatives according to the reality of the country, but we do much more than due process, for sure. And in general, I mean, we have different programs, different initiatives, but I would say that in general, we work on 3 areas. The first one is in relation to the justice systems, to justice, because as you can imagine, the justice systems everywhere in the world, I mean, this is a basis, is a fundamental, the basic column of democracy, of the rule of law. So our first program area is on justice, and within this topic, we work to promote judicial independence. For maybe in the United States, it's relatively common and normal to have judges who are independent, who are not, who don't represent particular interests. But in Latin America, it's not necessarily like this. There are countries where finding independent judges is not so easy. We have countries where, when there is a government in power, maybe pushes judges to decide in favor to the government. So judicial independence is a very important topic in Latin America. Lately, I would say during the last 10 years, political pressure wasn't the only threat against judicial independence. During the last 10 years, corruption has become also a very important threat to judicial independence. Transnational corporations that pay bribes to judges is very, very common, and it has also become a very important threat to judicial independence. Another important area in relation to the justice systems is the fight against impunity for grave human rights violations. This is also a difference with the United States. In Latin America, during the last 30, 40 years, we had several countries that went through civil wars, internal wars, wars against guerrilla groups, and these events, these times, left a big legacy of human rights violations. I don't know if you have gone through this topic already in the class, but in general, historically, we understand, or we understood, human rights violation when a crime is committed from a state representative to a civilian. So during these civil wars in Latin America, in particular in my country, Peru, we had a lot of crimes committed by the military and the police forces, and the justice system hasn't done much about it. And this is the same thing in Guatemala, in El Salvador, maybe in Chile, in Argentina. All of these countries went through civil wars, and the legacy of crimes committed by the state forces is still a pending issue in terms of justice. And this is why we work, especially in Central America, to promote justice for grave human rights violations. There is another area which we have been working a lot during the last year. And you could, at the beginning, you could think, but what is the relationship between this area and justice? Well, I think Luis had explained it very well. Our second program area is related to national resources and human rights, and in particular, national resources, indigenous peoples, and human rights. And this is interesting because many people at the beginning, when we created this program, a lot of people asked me, Katya, why are you creating a program related to national resources, indigenous peoples, when your organization work on human rights in general? Well, as Luis mentioned, and as all of us know, human rights violations within the context of human rights population is very common in Latin America. And during the last years, it has been an explosion of national resources extraction in the region. And most of these national resources are in indigenous areas. And although we have like a legal architecture recognizing and defending the land and the territories of indigenous peoples, when the state decided to give a concession to a private company to extract national resources in an indigenous area, they don't care about the national or international legislation. They don't care about it. So for me, when I saw this pattern along the region, this pattern of social conflicts, tensions, even violent conflicts between state forces, police forces, military forces, indigenous populations, and also companies, private companies around the extraction of national resources, we thought that we should say something, because international law has said something that have to be used in this kind of tension. So we have this program, which is run by a colleague of mine who was here in your class, Carlos, Daniel Cerqueira, because we think that it's a human rights problem. The destruction of national resources in Latin America is a human rights problem right now. And another program area in DPLF is with countries, we call it in transition, or that we want to have these countries, we want a transition for these countries, like Venezuela, like Bolivia, and Nicaragua. I can imagine, Carlos, you have talked to your students about these countries and the complicated situation they live. So we work a lot on these three countries, especially thinking about the reforms that the judiciary has to have when a transition finally arrives. We also work in terms of justice for human rights violations. We follow the current investigation about Venezuela before the International Criminal Court. And the same thing with Nicaragua and Bolivia. No, they are three countries very important for our work. So this is in general the topics that we work in DPLF. We use a lot the Interamerican human rights system. Carlos mentioned it. We have the Interamerican Commission of Human Rights. We have the Interamerican Court of Human Rights, which are like a supranational. The Interamerican system is a supranational body made up by the Commission and the Court, which has, which has power all over the region. Even the United States, although the United States hasn't signed the Inter-American Convention of Human Rights, the United States is part of the Organization of American States and is part of other international and inter-American treaties, and is part of this discussion. I mean, I cannot, or you cannot have a decision made by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights against the United States. That's right, because the United States is not, part of the jurisdiction of the court, but is part of the ecosystem of the Organization of American States. So there are other treaties and other obligations that are binding for the United States. And this is actually one of the reasons why DPLF is in Washington, D.C., because I can imagine you wonder why an organization working to promote the rule of law and human rights in Latin America is based in the United States. And the reason, I mean, we have two main reasons. The first one is because the Organization of American States, and in particular, the Interamerican Commission of Human Rights, is here in Washington, D.C. And it is important to do advocacy, to inform the Interamerican Commission of Human Rights, so we can have decisions, recommendations, even tweets from the Interamerican Commission of Human Rights raising awareness or even denouncing concrete states for human rights violations. So this is one very important reason why we are here, the Interamerican Commission of Human Rights. And the second reason is because, well, here you have the US government and other embassies, but in particular, the US government still has a lot of, I wouldn't say power, but they can pressure a lot Latin American countries. So it is important to keep informed the US government so they can do something, I mean, using, of course, soft diplomacy or diplomacy to promote changes in our countries. Before finishing, I want to mention two things. One is the relevance, I mean, I want to address again the relevance of the Organization of American States based in Washington, D.C., and the relevance of the Interamerican Commission of Human Rights, which is the only supranational body in charge of monitoring the human rights performance of all our countries. Unfortunately, Latin American countries use it a lot, use the court and the commission a lot. The US, not much. I think there are a lot of opportunities for you to use the Inter-American Commission more in favor of, you know, victims of human rights violations in the United States. Again, we cannot send a case against the United States to the court because the US is not part of the court jurisdiction, but the United States is part of the commission jurisdiction. So you can use the different mechanisms that the commission has in order to raise awareness, in order to promote more visibility, to put the United States or a concrete situation under the spotlight, even to promote public hearings about particular topics happening in the United States. So this is very important, and you should use it more. And just to finish, yeah, I want to come back a little bit to what Carlos said about my life. I mean, my professional life, because I think that we need more human rights defenders. We need more people that decided to use even the law or other kind of studies, other areas of knowledge to promote social justice, to promote the rule of law. No, I think at least, I mean, in my area, which is law, yeah, I think that 99% of my friends, the students, I mean, my colleagues in the university are working for the private sector or the state. I think we have just 2 people working in the non-profit sector. I think it's not easy, but I think if you really are committed to social change and maybe talk to people who have gone through this path and can advise you which doors to knock, I don't know. I think it's possible. It's possible to work on this from this perspective. I mean, using the law to promote change and not just using the law to represent a client. And I think you can get some important achievements. I think it's important. This ecosystem of human rights organizations at the national level, at the international level have showed during the last 30 years that it's an important movement with up and downs like every other movement, but it's still strong, no? And I think it's worth it to maybe knowing a little bit more about it and trying to be part of it maybe at some point of your professional life.